Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Gaia and I'm a 4th year psychology and criminology student at Nottingham Trent University. So recently I've had so many DMs on how to pick the right house, what price range is best, how to pick flatmates, how to deal with landlords. I know how stressful it can be looking for a house, especially if you're in 1st year and have literally just met everyone. So for today's video, I'm going to be telling you all of my best tips and tricks on how to find the best student house for you. If you've been subscribed to my channel over the last 2 years, you'll have seen me move both in and out of several different houses and talk about what my experience was like living in those properties. So if you do like the sound of today's video, it would mean the world if you could give this video a massive thumbs up, just so I know to make more of these kind of student advice videos in the future. Let me know down in the comments if you are currently looking for a student house and how you're finding the general process. Also, if you're new and you'd like to stick around for more uni content, lifestyle and student vlogs, I'd love if you could go click that subscribe button right now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is the property market, because that alone is just a whirlwind to think about. At this point in the year, chances are you'll have probably seen loads of other students start to either look at houses or secure deposits, and that is because the property market for student houses tends to open in October. I know it seems like such a bizarre time to start viewing houses right now, especially if you're in 1st year, because you literally know like nobody, let alone people to live with. Trust me, it sucks. However, that's just how the market is. If you want a nice house with all of your preferences in, I really recommend being organised and looking as early as you can, because the more popular of the student houses in your university's area are bound to go like that, especially those bigger properties that can house around 8 to 12 people. The most popular way to browse houses is to look at websites such as Zoopla, Rightmove, or the landlords / student housing company's own website. Another essential tip is to attend housing fairs that your university will put on around this time of year. These fairs are where landlords and companies will talk to you about their properties, and it's really good to go along because it gives you a great feel of not only what they offer when it comes to properties, but also the general vibe of the company. Sometimes if you go to these fairs as well, they might offer you discounts there and then that they might not necessarily offer you if, say, you just looked on their website. So before you even think about what house you want to live in, you need to think about who exactly you want to live with. This can be coursemates, current flatmates, friends from other societies, etc. Sometimes this can also include non-students. Like, for example, you may have a boyfriend or girlfriend that you have met since you started at university who isn't a student themselves. Some landlords will allow this, but it's really important to check with them because not all will, because some will have a strict student-only policy. I remember when I was looking for a house in 2nd year, I was in this exact situation and the landlord was completely fine with it. One thing to remember though is that if you are planning to live in a student house with a non-student, they will have to pay council tax. When it comes to housemates, you're going to want to live with people that you like, obviously, but you are also going to want to make sure they are tidy and respect both your space and your boundaries. It is very hard to pick people to live with when you've only just met them, because you're still getting to know what they're like, and you might choose to believe them when they say they are tidy just because you haven't experienced living with them yet. However, the struggle of finding the right flatmates isn't always the case with 1st years, as a lot of the time people will know these friends or course mates for several years and think that they're perfect to live with because they really get on. But when it comes to actually living with them, they'll find that their friend is just impossible to live with and may get into loads of fights and just start treating them generally really badly. Living with someone can really bring out sides that you didn't originally see in a person, and I can hold my hands up and say that I literally experienced this like every year that I had a student house. So you're not alone if you have had that too. And you will also find that some people have even identified this even before they've moved in, that their best friend at uni isn't the best person to live with, so they choose to live with other people, and that's completely fine. When it comes to partners, you, my friend, know your partner better than anyone, especially me. But I personally wouldn't suggest living with them while you're at university. I've heard of so many stories of people breaking up at university because they lived with their partner and ended up feeling like they were living on top of each other and just felt generally suffocated. I think it's better to live apart because not only do you need to prioritize time for your degree, but you also need time dedicated to yourself and your own independent activities. Plus, if you live apart, you can actually plan with your partner specific days to spend time with them, and by doing that you can go about the rest of the things you need to do while also looking forward to spending time with your partner. However, this isn't always the case. Some couples do make it work and don't find any trouble living with each other, so at the end of the day you should do what's best for you. I don't want you to think though that if you do struggle to live with your partner at university that means your relationship is doomed or whatever, because that is not the case. My relationship with my boyfriend Dan is really strong, but I know that there are times that I need to myself because I do lead a very independent and busy life, and that is completely fine. So the most important thing by far when you are looking for a student house is to make sure that you book house viewings. I literally can't stress this enough, like it is just so vital, because sometimes students will place a deposit on a house before even viewing it, and then only when they move in they realise that the house actually looks completely different to the photos online. House viewings are completely free, and honestly they will save you so much time and effort when it comes to weighing up different student houses. So as soon as you arrive at the property for a viewing, make sure that you film and take photos of everything. This is another really important point. Just get your phone out and start recording outside the house and every room that you go into. This will be super helpful when you are deciding which house to go for later, because trust me, you will forget what it looks like you will. Also, if you record, you will capture everything the landlord is saying, such as details about the house and things about the contract, which are really good to look back on because you will also forget that. While you're doing the viewing, if they do offer to change anything or give you a discount there and then, make sure you get it in writing so they can't go back on their word. Trust me, landlords are very good at doing that when they want to. It's also always worth to ask the landlord any queries or questions you have while you're there, because you might forget to email them when you get back home. So the first thing you want to think about when looking for a house is location. Most cities with universities will have specific student areas. For Nottingham, that's the city centre, the Arboretum, a bit of Radford and Forest Fields. Places to avoid in Nottingham are Highston Green, Radford and St Anne's. Some students do choose to live in these areas, and that's completely fine if you're happy with that, but I personally don't think they're the safest locations to live in while you're a student. Before you book a house viewing, make sure to look at the location and what's nearby, such as shops or eateries. Also look to see if it's close to the uni, and if not, what nearby transport links there are, such as trams, buses, trains. I guess if you're getting a train to uni you probably want to get something closer, but also bear in mind it might be slightly more pricier too if you live in the city centre compared to, say, if you live slightly further out. Most student houses though you will find are in walking distance, so you're definitely going to find something for you. Something that a lot of people don't always remember to factor in when they're looking at a house is security. In student halls you will have around the clock 24/7 CCTV and even maybe a security team on standby if anything happens. However, when you're living in a student house you will not. So make sure you're living in a safe area. Make sure you aren't living next to or in front of any dark alleyways. Also, if there's a garden or smoking area in any of these properties that you're looking at, make sure the back gates or surrounding walls are secure. In first year, I remember we had a really rusty, kind of mouldy gate that led out into this dark alleyway behind our house, and I was so creeped out by it. Like, I'm honestly surprised we never had any break-ins or any creepy people staring into our smoking area. Look at what types of locks they use, not just on the back gates or back doors, but also the front door as well. I remember in second year we had such an awkward front door that wouldn't always lock, despite us having an actual key to lock the front of it and like an additional lock inside. We also lived in the red light district of Nottingham, which is just a whole nother story to tell. When you're at the viewing though, just look at how easy it would be for someone else to break in. This is just because it is quite common for student houses to be broken into. Also check locks in any windows, especially windows downstairs. Landlords and other student housing companies are notorious when it comes to ensuring things are not well maintained. So really make sure security is a priority before you put a deposit down for anything. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is price, bills, the contract and just paperwork in general. So I can't really really tell you what the best price when it comes to a student house is, because that factors in a lot of things, most importantly your financial situation. It also depends on the student city or town you're living in, because certain locations are going to be more expensive than others. For example, London. Personally, Nottingham is quite decently priced. You'll have properties ranging from about £80 to £200 per week. Personally, in second year I paid £150 a week, and in third year I paid I think £100 a week. So as you can see, I've kind of lived on both ends of the housing pricing spectrum, so to speak. Like I said, it all depends on your financial situation and how much student loan you get. I would suggest a good budget to go for when you're looking at a decent student house that's safe and is in an alright area and has the facilities you need. Probably between 110 to maybe 135 a week. Most students with a typical average student loan can't really afford, like especially over 150. And I said don't go below 110 because most of the time when you go below that number, you will find that the quality and like standards of living at the property isn't always that great. Things will be falling apart. You might not have a working washing machine. You might have mold. You might not really be living in a safe area. However, that isn't always the case though, because as I mentioned a second ago, I did pay £100 a week for my third year house. That was great. That was actually everything I needed, but that was just kind of because we were lucky and because we managed to get a property quite early. The house itself was kind of in a court of its own of like other student houses, so it was almost like living in student accommodation but just student houses. That is quite rare. Like, I don't want to sell you this dream that you're gonna find a lot of student houses that are £100 a week with that level of quality and security. However, just because you pay even more for a house doesn't mean it's going to be like really nice, because the house that I paid £150 for in second year, like I said, had a really dodgy front door, had a really dodgy alleyway in the back. If you've watched my vlogs from second year, you'll see that the ceiling actually was collapsing because we had the bathroom above the kitchen and it was warping, and our student housing company literally did nothing to fix it. Like, I think the only thing they did was just paint over it, which literally obviously not going to save a ceiling from caving in. At the end of the day, when you're thinking about house prices, make sure you can afford it and make sure that it has all of the facilities and you're happy with everything that comes in the house, because you might find a really cheap house like 80 quid a week, but you might find it's perfect. Also, when you're looking at a house, check that the cost of utilities such as water and electricity is included or not in the total weekly rent. The houses I lived in did include the utility cost, but some houses don't always include it, so it's always really good to check because it is like a hidden figure. So on top of what you need to pay for the rent of the house, you will also need to pay a holding fee, which you can pay after the viewing to reserve the house so others don't get the house before you. That should be like £100 each for everyone that wants to live there, but it won't be any more than a week's worth of rent. Once you've put down the holding fee and you've decided you definitely want a house, next you need to pay the deposit, which is normally the first 2 weeks or month of rent. Once you've paid the deposit, you should get confirmation that the money has been taken off the total amount you need to pay for the year, because that deposit acts as your first few weeks of rent. Also, a really important thing to point out is that you should not be paying any admin fees during this whole process. Make sure to really read the contract. This is vital because landlords are literally banking on you to not read it properly so they can scam you later when it comes to getting the deposit back. It's quite easy to read and understand, but if not, you can always get your parents to read it through with you. While you're reading the contract, make sure you're reading all of the clauses properly when it comes to what happens if you damage some property, or who's responsible for paying if, say, your flatmate decides one day just to not pay rent anymore. Also look at what insurance is in place. Say if there's any extenuating circumstances such as the pandemic happening. Sometimes if an event happens that forces you to not be able to live in the property, you can get money back. Like, for example, when the pandemic first happened and we were all sent home for the first March lockdown, I was able to get some money back because I obviously wasn't using any of the utilities. When you sign the contract, you will also need to include details of your guarantor. If you don't know what a guarantor is, this is basically someone like your parents tenants who are willing and financially able to pay your rent. Say if you just mysteriously disappear or suddenly for some reason just can't pay your rent yourself. I've personally never known anyone who's had to get their guarantor to pay that money, but it's just a safety net just to ensure the landlords get their money. So the next thing you need to think about when looking for a student house is what utilities are included. Some utilities that you may want when looking at a student house include washing machine and dryer, dishwasher, mop, vacuum, ironing board and iron. Also check if they have strong Wi-Fi. A washing machine and vacuum are a must. Mops are really handy too, especially if you have non-carpet floors. If you are one of those people that does like to throw parties or prees, try to look for houses that have no carpet in places like the kitchen or other rooms that you're going to throw the house party. You don't necessarily need a dishwasher. This is kind of like a luxury at university, but these are really handy if, say, you live in a flat with lots of people and they're not the kind of people that wash up straight away. If you have a dishwasher, this way you can avoid having everyone pile their plates in the sink. Like I said, it isn't essential though. I had a dishwasher in both of my student houses and I didn't use it at all really, because I'm one of those people that would much prefer to hand wash all of their plates and make sure they're definitely clean. Call me weird, I know, but that's just me. The next bit of advice I want to give isn't essential, but I know it did personally matter to me, and that is when you're looking at a student house, make sure all of the rooms are like similar sized. I know this isn't always possible, especially if, say, you do find a house that you really like, but since you're all paying the same amount of rent, it's a lot better if you find a property where everyone has the same size room. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I suddenly had to just live with strangers in second year for personal reasons. They hadn't decided on rooms when I agreed to live with them, but then as soon as I signed the contract, they were something like,
oh, by the way, you're gonna get the smallest room because the other girl who was supposed to live there was gonna have that.
Even though they never told me that when I was first thinking of living with them. I definitely did find it a little sneaky, because if you've seen my videos, you'll know that I did have kind of a box room. Like, the room was quite tiny, and the other girls that lived in that house had really big ones. Like, one of the girls actually had like a whole floor to herself. I just feel like, considering we were all paying 150 quid, my room just definitely was not worth that. I didn't really like the way that they wanted to just bully me into having the smallest rooms. So a good tip, so you don't fall out with friends and stuff, is to try and live in a house where like everything's fair. So if you own a car or have housemates that do, another good thing to look out for when viewing a house is whether or not they have parking facilities. If they do have parking, look at whether the house actually has its own drive where you can park the car, or whether you're going to have to park the car on a side street instead. If it is a side street, make sure it is secure. Also make sure to ask the landlord whether it's free parking or whether you need to pay for a permit for the entire year. So my lovely people, that is pretty much everything you need to know when it comes to picking a student house. If you have any tips that you didn't hear me cover in the video that you think would be super helpful to everyone else, it'd be amazing if you could comment them down below. If you did find this video helpful, please give this video a massive like, and if you're new here and you want to stick around, go click that subscribe button. Also, if you have any video requests, I'd love to hear them in the comments. But other than that, I've been Gaia. This has been everything you need to know about picking a student house, and I'll see you next week for more content. Bye!